They say betrayal sounds like shouting, slammed doors, broken glass, and a voice so loud it shakes the walls. Mine didn't. Mine sounded like my wife crying behind a locked bathroom door at 2:14 in the morning, trying so hard to keep it quiet that it became the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. I stood outside that door with my hand raised to knock, and for the first time in 22 years of marriage, I was afraid to ask my own wife if she was okay. Because deep down, I already knew she wasn't. And deep down, I knew neither were we. My name is Ethan Mercer. I was 47 years old when my marriage died, but if I'm being honest, the funeral happened long before the paperwork, long before the judge stamped the divorce decree, long before my wife Lauren sat across from me with tears in her eyes and admitted she had traded 22 years of loyalty for one reckless night she couldn't take back. People think marriages collapse in one moment. They don't. They crack in silence. They rot in distance. They bleed out through unanswered questions, forced smiles, and the kind of coldness that shows up before anybody says the word goodbye. For most of our life together, Lauren and I looked solid from the outside. We had the kind of marriage people pointed at during backyard barbecues and said, "That's what I want one day." We had a brick house in Columbus, Ohio, a son in college, a daughter finishing high school, and enough shared history to fill a lifetime. We had survived layoffs, miscarriages, late mortgage payments, a kitchen fire, my father's death, her mother's chemo, and all the little storms that either break a marriage or weld two people together. I thought we had been welded. I thought history meant security. I thought time meant trust. That was my first mistake. Lauren and I met when we were both too young to know how hard life could get and too in love to care. She was 19, loud laugh, bright eyes, the kind of woman who walked into a room and carried summer in with her. I was 21, working construction by day and taking classes at night, trying to convince the world I had a plan. She used to tease me for how serious I was, said I looked like I was born worrying about taxes. She made me lighter. I made her feel safe. At least that's what she used to say. We built our entire adult lives side by side. The first apartment had stained carpet and a heater that sounded like it was dying every winter. The first year of marriage, we ate spaghetti more nights than I can count because it was cheap and filling. We had dreams bigger than our bank account, and somehow that made us feel rich. When our son, Mason, was born, Lauren cried holding him and whispered, "Look what we made." When our daughter Sadie came 3 years later, I remember standing in the hospital room looking at all three of them and thinking if life never gave me another good thing, I'd still die a blessed man. That's why what happened later felt so impossible. Because betrayal is harder to accept when it comes from someone who once knew your heartbeat better than your own name. About a year before everything fell apart, Lauren began changing in ways I couldn't quite name. Not dramatic enough to call out, just enough to make the room feel different. She became distracted, restless, quieter in some moments, sharper in others. She'd stare at her phone, then flip it face down when I walked in. She started going out more with coworkers from the medical office where she worked. Nothing wild, just girls' nights, happy hours, birthday dinners, weekend spa days. I told myself it was healthy. We were getting older, the kids were growing up, and maybe she was just finding pieces of herself outside of being a wife and mother. I wanted to be the kind of husband who didn't suffocate his wife with suspicion. So I ignored what my gut kept trying to tell me. I ignored the way she stopped reaching for my hand in the car. I ignored the way she began treating affection like an obligation she was too tired to fulfill. I ignored how often she used the phrase, "I just need space." You can lose your marriage long before you lose your spouse. Sometimes the body stays while the heart slowly leaves the room. The night she cheated started like any other Thursday. I was at home grilling chicken on the back patio. Sadie was upstairs on FaceTime with a friend. Lauren came home from work later than usual, rushed through the door, and said one of the women at her office, a woman named Tasha, was celebrating her promotion downtown. She said she'd already promised to go. She looked stressed, but not guilty. More distracted than anything. "Don't wait up," she said as she touched up her makeup in the hallway mirror. I remember smiling at her and saying, "You look beautiful." She barely met my eyes when she said thank you. That should have hurt more than it did. Or maybe it hurt exactly as much as it should have, and I just didn't want to name it. She left around 7:30. I cleaned the kitchen, watched half a ball game, and eventually fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, it was 1:06 a.m. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I texted, "You okay?" No response. At 1:39, her car finally pulled in. She came in quietly, heels in one hand, purse in the other, moving like someone trying not to wake a house full of strangers. I sat up on the couch and asked if she had fun. She startled like she hadn't expected me to be awake. Then she gave me this strange half-smile and said, "Yeah, just tired." But I knew my wife. That wasn't tired. That was rattled. Her lipstick was gone. Her hair was a mess, not the kind wind causes, but the kind hands do. And her perfume was mixed with something else. Alcohol, sweat, another place, another person. It hit me all at once, and even then I rejected the thought because some truths are too ugly to let in on the first knock. She went straight to the bathroom and locked the door. Then I heard her crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just shattered. I stood outside for maybe a full minute before asking Lauren. Silence. Then, "I'm fine." Nobody says I'm fine like that when they're fine. I asked if she was sick. She said no. I asked if someone had upset her. She said no. I asked if she wanted to talk. And then came the longest silence of my life. When she finally came out, her eyes were red, but her face was blank. She wouldn't look at me. She went straight to bed, fully avoiding my touch when I followed her in. I stood there in the dark, feeling like an intruder in my own marriage. The next morning, she acted almost normal. Too normal. That's the thing about guilt. It often wears the mask of routine. She packed Sadie's lunch, drank half a cup of coffee, and reminded me the garbage truck was coming. She talked like someone reading from a script written by panic. I watched her the way you watch a bridge after hearing a crack in the beams. You can still stand on it, but you no longer trust it to hold. 3 days later, I learned what she had done. Not from her. From the insurance statement. I had stopped by the mailbox on my way in from work and found an envelope from our provider. It wasn't unusual, but when I opened it, I saw a charge from an urgent care clinic across town, dated Friday morning after her night out. Lab work. Testing. Follow-up. Requested. I walked into the kitchen holding that piece of paper like it was on fire. Lauren was at the sink rinsing strawberries. Sadie was at a friend's house. The house was quiet enough for the truth to break clean. "What is this?" I asked. She looked at the statement, and all the color drained from her face. Right there, before she even spoke, I knew. Because innocent people get confused. Guilty people collapse. She gripped the edge of the counter so hard I thought she might fall. "Ethan." I cut her off. "What happened?" She started crying immediately, which only made me angrier. Not because tears are meaningless, but because some tears come too late. "It was a mistake," she whispered. That sentence changed my life. There are words you can recover from in a marriage. Harsh words, careless words, even cruel words. But it was a mistake is a coffin sentence when it follows betrayal. I remember staring at her, waiting for the rest of it, hoping for literally any explanation that wasn't what I already understood. It was one night, she said. It didn't mean anything, I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my body couldn't process pain that sharp without turning it into something ugly. One night? I said. You think that makes this better? She covered her face and started sobbing. I don't know what to say. Well, start with his name. She hesitated. That hesitation nearly broke me more than the confession itself. His name, I repeated. Brandon. That name still disgusts me. Not because he owed me loyalty. He didn't. But because in one careless night, a stranger got invited into the center of a life I had spent 2 decades protecting. She told me they'd met at the bar after Tasha and the others had gone to another place. She said Lauren stayed behind because she was tired and didn't want the noise. He started talking to her, bought her another drink, said all the right things to a woman who, in her own words, had been feeling invisible for a long time. Invisible. That word hit hard, because I knew I had played a role in the distance between us. I had become predictable, focused on bills, work, maintenance, routines. I had loved her steadily, but maybe not loudly. I had been present, but maybe not attentive. There's a difference, and I know that now. But here's the truth nobody should be afraid to say. Neglect is a problem to discuss. Betrayal is a choice. Plenty of marriages go through lonely seasons. Not every lonely spouse takes off their wedding ring in their heart before they take it off their hand. She said she went with him to a hotel. She said it was stupid, impulsive, self-destructive, and over almost as quickly as it started. She said the moment it was over, she felt sick. Ashamed. Dirty, not because she got caught, but because she realized she had detonated her own life for a moment she didn't even want while it was happening. Then she said the sentence that made my blood run cold. He called me the next morning. I didn't speak. She could barely get the words out. He said I needed to get tested. The room tilted. All the air disappeared. My chest felt tight enough to crack bone. I stepped back from her like I had touched a live wire. You brought a disease into this house? She started saying it wasn't confirmed, that he told her he had just found out, that she panicked and went to urgent care immediately, that she hadn't touched me, that she was waiting for results, that she was going to tell me, that she was scared. Scared. That word enraged me in ways I still struggle to explain, because fear after betrayal is not the same as conscience before it. She was scared now. But where was that fear when she got in his car? Where was that fear when she followed him into a hotel room? Where was that fear when she traded 22 years of shared vows for one night with a man whose last name she didn't even know? That night we sat at opposite ends of the living room like strangers waiting for a train. She cried until her voice went hoarse. I said almost nothing. Some pain is too deep for shouting. It becomes quiet, surgical, cold. She told me she had hated herself every minute since it happened. I believed her. And somehow, that didn't help at all. Because remorse does not erase damage, regret does not disinfect betrayal, and apologies do not rebuild trust that has been contaminated at the root. The test results came 2 days later. She had contracted an infection that was treatable, but the diagnosis wasn't the point. The medicine wasn't the point. The point was that the woman I had built a life with had exposed our marriage to humiliation, risk, and a level of emotional destruction I didn't know how to survive. I got tested too. Sitting in that clinic waiting room felt like the universe had reached into my chest and humiliated me personally. Men in work boots, women holding clipboards, the receptionist calling names, daytime television flickering from a mounted screen, and there I was, a husband of 22 years waiting to find out if his wife's one-night stand had changed his body, not just his heart. No man imagines that as part of his marriage vows. I came back negative. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I just felt empty. Lauren started trying immediately. Letters on my pillow, Text messages from the other room. Long confessions. Therapy appointments she scheduled before I agreed to go. Promises. Please. She said she would quit her job, share her location, give me passwords, call his number in front of me and block him forever. She said she would spend the rest of her life making it up to me. I asked her one question. How do you make up for making me feel like a fool in my own home? She had no answer. Because there isn't one. A week later, I told Mason and Sadie we needed to talk. To this day, that was one of the hardest moments of my life. Not because I wanted to protect Lauren from consequences, but because once children, no matter how old, see the truth about their parents, something innocent disappears forever. We sat at the dining room table where birthdays had been celebrated, homework had been done, and Christmas wrapping paper had once covered every inch of wood. Lauren cried before I even finished the first sentence. Mason's jaw clenched so hard, I thought he might break a tooth. Sadie started shaking her head before I was done, whispering, "No, no, no," like she could reverse reality by refusing to hear it. Our son stood up so fast his chair nearly fell backward. "You did what?" he said to his mother. Lauren tried to explain, but there are no adult words strong enough to make betrayal sound smaller to your children. Sadie burst into tears and ran upstairs. Mason looked at me, then at his mother, and something in his face changed. It was grief, yes, but also disappointment, the kind that ages a person in seconds. He said, "Dad loved you." Present tense would have hurt. Past tense destroyed me. Lauren started saying she knew, that she had ruined everything, that she was sorry. Mason just walked out. After that, the house didn't feel like a house anymore. It felt like the aftermath of a storm. Still standing, technically, but soaked through, splintered, unsafe. Lauren wanted reconciliation. She begged for it, really. She asked me not to throw away decades over one terrible choice. She said people survive worse. She said families heal. She said our history had to count for something. And she was right. History does count. That's exactly why it hurt so much. If this had been a casual relationship, maybe I would have walked away angry and moved on. But 22 years means shared funerals, first apartments, emergency rooms, inside jokes, family vacations, coffee habits, retirement plans, children, losses, anniversaries, and all the ordinary Tuesdays that quietly become a life. She didn't just cheat on me. She cheated on our entire history. She put a stain on every memory and forced me to revisit my whole life, wondering where love ended and performance began. I tried therapy once. Sat there on a gray couch while Lauren described her shame, and the counselor talked about disconnection, unmet needs, emotional drift, vulnerability, and repair. Everything she said may have been clinically true. But as I listened, I realized something awful. I no longer wanted to repair us. That desire was gone. Not injured. Gone. And once that happens, you can't manufacture it out of duty. On the drive home, Lauren asked in a trembling voice, "Is there any chance at all?" I looked through the windshield and answered with the most honest sentence I had in me. "I can forgive you eventually, but I will never trust you again. And I can't stay married to someone I have to survive." She started crying so hard she had to turn her face toward the window. I didn't comfort her. That sounds cruel when I say it out loud, but the truth is, I had spent 22 years being her safe place. That night, I realized I no longer belonged in that role. She had stepped outside our marriage for one night, and somehow in doing that, she had stepped outside my protection too. I filed for divorce 3 weeks later. People reacted exactly the way people always do when a long marriage ends. Shock first, then curiosity dressed up as concern, then quiet gossip, mutual friends taking sides without calling it that, church people talking about grace, relatives talking about second chances, men at work clapping me on the shoulder like I had survived a war. Women who barely knew me lowering their voices when they said, "I'm so sorry." Everybody had an opinion. Almost nobody had to live with the reality. Lauren moved into a small apartment 12 minutes away, close enough for practical matters, far enough that I wouldn't run into her by accident. Sadie stayed with me most of the time. Mason stopped answering his mother for nearly a month. That may have been the part that hurt Lauren most. Not losing me. Losing the version of herself her children could admire. Divorce is strange. People think it's one big dramatic ending. Usually it's just paperwork, signatures, account transfers, furniture division, and 100 tiny griefs spread across ordinary days. Deciding who keeps the dog bed. Changing emergency contact forms. Seeing one side of the closet empty. Learning how loud the refrigerator sounds when a marriage is gone. One afternoon I found Lauren's old coffee mug in the back of the cabinet. White ceramic. Tiny chip on the handle. The one she always used on Sunday mornings. I stood there in the kitchen holding it, and for the first time since discovering everything, I cried. Not for the woman she had become, for the woman I thought I married, for the life I thought I was going to keep, for the stupid, beautiful little routines that betrayal murders along with trust. That's the part people don't understand. Infidelity doesn't just destroy the future. It reaches backward and poisons the past. Suddenly your favorite memories have sharp edges. Suddenly anniversaries feel embarrassing. Suddenly all the promises that once warmed you feel like lines from a play performed for an audience of one. The divorce was finalized 8 months after the confession. I wore the same navy suit I'd worn to Mason's graduation. Lauren wore a gray dress and looked 10 years older than the last time I had really seen her. Not physically. Spiritually. Regret had settled into her face in a way no makeup could hide. When the hearing ended, we stepped out into the cold. For a second, we just stood there in silence. Two people with 22 years behind them and nothing ahead together. She looked at me and said, "I wish I could go back." I believed that too. But some doors only open one way. I told her, so do I. But not to save this marriage. To save the version of us that existed before you destroyed it. That was the last fully honest conversation we ever had. Life after divorce was not some triumphant movie montage where I instantly healed, hit the gym, met someone better, and rediscovered joy by the second chorus of a country song. Real healing is slower, uglier, less photogenic. There were nights I sat in the dark longer than I should have. Mornings where I woke up reaching for a body that wasn't there, and then remembered why. Birthdays that felt incomplete. Holidays that felt rearranged and bruised. But peace did come. Not all at once. In pieces. It came the first Saturday I drank coffee on the back porch and realized the silence no longer felt like punishment. It came when Sadie laughed again in the kitchen and the sound didn't carry heartbreak behind it. It came when Mason finally said, "I'm proud of how you handled this, Dad," and I had to look away so he wouldn't see my eyes fill. It came when I understood that leaving wasn't bitterness. It was self-respect. There's a lie people tell betrayed spouses, especially those in long marriages. They say, don't throw it all away over one mistake. But I didn't throw it away. She did. I simply refused to live in the wreckage and call it home. That distinction matters. I don't hate Lauren. That surprises people. I expected to hate her for years, but hatred is exhausting, and eventually I got tired of carrying what she had already dropped. What I feel now is sadder than hate. I grieve her, not because I want her back, because she became someone neither of us would have recognized 20 years ago. And maybe that's the cruelest part of betrayal. It doesn't just reveal character. Sometimes it reveals how far someone has drifted from their own. A little over a year after the divorce, Lauren called me one evening. Nothing dramatic, Just practical questions about Sadie's financial aid forms. We handled the details. There was a pause before hanging up. Then she said, very softly, "I know I don't deserve to ask this, but are you okay?" I looked out at the backyard, at the fence I had repaired myself, at the chair where I now sat alone without feeling abandoned, and I answered the only way I could. I'm getting there. That was true. Because healing after betrayal isn't about becoming the person you were before. That person trusted blindly. That person believed history alone could protect love. That person thought vows, once spoken, created immunity against human weakness. Healing is becoming someone wiser without becoming someone colder. That took time. It still does. If you're listening to this and you've been betrayed, let me say what I wish someone had said to me when my world split in two. What happened to you is not a reflection of your value. Someone else's selfishness is not proof that you were unlovable. Their dishonesty is not evidence that you lacked worth. Sometimes people break the best things they have because brokenness lives in them, not because something was missing in you. And if you're the one who betrayed someone, if you threw away loyalty for attention, excitement, validation, ego, or one reckless night you thought nobody would ever know about, understand this: regret is real, but it is not a reset button. Sorry does not restore innocence. Tears do not erase consequence. And some people can forgive you without ever inviting you back into the place you destroyed. That isn't cruelty. That's accountability. I still think about the bathroom door sometimes, that quiet crying behind it, not because I miss her, but because that was the exact sound of a life changing, the exact sound of truth trying to enter a home that lies had already contaminated. In another universe, maybe she opened that door and told me everything before I found out on paper. In another universe, maybe she never got in that man's car. In another universe, maybe a lonely season stayed a lonely season instead of becoming a permanent scar. But we don't live in another universe. We live with what we chose. She chose one night. I chose not to spend the rest of my life paying for it. And if that makes me the villain in the version she tells herself, I can live with that. Because I already lived through worse. I lived through the moment I realized the woman I trusted most had risked my health, shattered my home, and turned 22 years of devotion into a cautionary tale. I lived through watching my children's faith in their mother crack right in front of me. I lived through the humiliation, the anger, the paperwork, the empty closet, the silent dinners, the questions with no good answers. I lived through all of it, and I'm still here, still standing, still breathing. Still proof that a person can be broken by betrayal and refuse to stay broken. So no, this story does not end with revenge. It does not end with me ruining her life, exposing her publicly, or finding some dramatic way to make her hurt the way I hurt. Real life is quieter than that. Real pain is heavier. Real endings are rarely cinematic. This story ends the way many true stories do, with a man learning that love without trust is grief, with a father choosing dignity because his children were watching, with a husband becoming an ex-husband the day he understood that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. And with one final truth that cost me everything to learn: the person who betrays you for a moment of pleasure doesn't just lose the marriage. They lose the right to be shocked when you choose peace over their apology.